My sister pointed at my old car in front of 30 people and laughed. Then she turned around, leaned on her brand new BMW, and told everyone she built her life herself. What she didn't say, because she didn't know I'd ever stop, was that I was the one paying for that car every month for 2 years. That night I went home and canceled everything, the insurance, the auto pay, all of it. She wanted people to see a self-made woman. I just made sure she'd finally have to become one. Before I tell you what happened after I closed that laptop, I want to ask you something. If the person who humiliated you in public turned out to be living off your money in private, would you have done what I did? Or would you have kept paying just to keep the peace? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Now let me take you back, because what happened at that party didn't come out of nowhere. It was the last piece of a pattern that had been building for years. And if I'm being honest, the pattern I had helped build myself. I work in financial risk management. I spend my days running numbers, calculating exposure, identifying the exact moment a system becomes too fragile to sustain itself. I am very good at my job. The irony is that for years I could see the risk in everyone else's portfolio except my own family's, except my own life. My name is Jade. I grew up in a house where money was never discussed openly but was always felt quietly. My father left when I was 11 and my sister, Vivian, was 6. My mother worked double shifts at a medical billing office. And somewhere in the transition from a 2-income household to a 1-woman survival operation, I became the second adult in the room without anyone officially appointing me. I started working at 16. Not because I had to, but because I looked at my mother's face every Sunday night when she sat down to pay bills, and I decided I never wanted to be the reason that face got more tired. I paid for my own books, my own transport, my own everything. By the time I graduated college on a partial scholarship and 3 part-time jobs, I had already internalized one very specific belief. If you want something done, you fund it yourself. Vivian grew up differently, not because my mother loved her more. I want to be careful about that, because I don't actually believe that. But Vivian was younger. She was charming. She had this quality of making every room feel like it had been waiting for her. People gave things to Vivian. Opportunities, compliments, second chances. She never had to ask twice for anything because someone always stepped in before the second ask was needed. Most of the time, that someone was me. I paid for her driving lessons when she was 17. Because my mother couldn't that month and Vivian cried for 3 days straight. I co-signed her first apartment lease at 22 because her income was too new and her credit too thin to qualify a loan. I covered her car insurance for 6 months when she got her first job and told me she was sorting out her cash flow. 6 months became 14. I stopped counting after that. None of this felt like sacrifice at the time. It felt like math. I had the means, she had the need, I filled the gap. That is how I was wired. That is what I had always done. What I did not fully account for. And this is the part that embarrasses me as someone who works in risk, was the cultural tax I was paying on top of the financial one. Every time I stepped in quietly, I was also stepping out of the frame. Vivian got the credit. I got the receipt. She never said thank you the way people say thank you when they mean it. She said it the way people say it when they want the conversation to move on. A quick, "You're the best," seriously, followed immediately by a subject change. I told myself it was just her personality, that she showed love differently, that underneath the performance she knew what I had done for her. I told myself a lot of things. The BMW situation started about 2 years before the party. Vivian had just landed a position at a mid-sized marketing agency downtown, the kind of job that comes with a glass-walled office and a title that sounds more senior than the salary actually reflects. She called me, genuinely excited, and for about 4 minutes it was the kind of phone call I had always wanted us to have, just 2 sisters, happy for each other, no transaction involved. Then she said it. "I need a car, Jade. A real one. The kind that doesn't make people question whether I belong in the room." I knew what was coming before she finished the sentence. I knew what was coming before she finished a sentence. Her credit score at the time was what I would professionally describe as a liability with a payment history. She had 2 late marks from a store card she'd forgotten to close, a utilization rate sitting around 73%, and an income that had only been verifiable for 4 months. No lender was going to approve her for a BMW, not a loan. She didn't ask me directly. Vivian never asked directly. What she did was describe the problem in exhaustive detail, the rejection from the dealership, the look on the finance manager's face, how embarrassing it was to sit there and be told no, and then she went quiet in that specific way she had perfected over the years. The silence that was shaped exactly like a question. I asked her what the monthly payment would be if I co-signed. She told me. I ran the numbers in my head in about 8 seconds. I told her I would set up the auto pay from my account to make sure nothing was ever late, and she could transfer her share to me before the 5th of each month. She said, obviously, of course, you know I'm good for it. I did not know that, but I wanted to believe it, and I think, if I am being completely honest with myself, I also liked being the person who could make the problem disappear. I had been that person for so long that I had stopped questioning whether the role was still serving me, so I signed the paperwork. The loan went under my name. The insurance policy went under my name. The auto pay came out of my checking account like clockwork every single month, while Vivian drove to her glass-walled office and told people she had built her life herself. For 2 years I let her, until the night she laughed at my car. The party was Vivian's idea, obviously. She called it a housewarming/career milestone celebration, which in practice meant she had rented out the rooftop of a restaurant downtown, invited 40 people, and asked my mother to bring her famous rice dish so she wouldn't have to cater the whole thing herself. Vivian was very good at making other people's contributions feel like a natural extension of her own vision. I almost didn't go. Not because I was busy, though I was, but because in the weeks leading up to that night, something had been sitting wrong in my chest that I couldn't quite name. Vivian had missed her last 2 transfers. Not by a little. She hadn't sent anything at all. When I texted her about it, the first time she replied with a voice note, always a voice note. Never actual words she'd have to commit to in writing, saying she'd had some unexpected expenses and would sort it out. Next cycle. The second time I asked, she left me on red for 4 days and then responded with a single laughing emoji and relax, it's coming. I paid both months out of my own pocket because the alternative was a missed payment on a loan under my name, and I was not going to let Vivian's cash flow management become a mark on my credit report. I told myself I would talk to her at the party, privately, calmly, the way adults handle things. I never got the chance. I arrived a little after 7, parked on the street 2 blocks away because the garage was full, and walked up alone carrying a bottle of wine and a card I had spent 20 minutes choosing. The rooftop was already loud, already warm, already entirely Vivian's world. String lights, a photographer moving through the crowd, a signature cocktail with her initials on the napkin. She had built an aesthetic out of her own life and invited everyone she knew to admire it. I found my mother near the food table and hugged her. She looked proud in the uncomplicated way mothers look proud when they have decided to only see the good things. I didn't say anything about the missed payments. I poured myself a drink and told myself the night would be fine. It was fine for exactly 40 minutes. I was standing near the edge of the rooftop with my mother and one of Vivian's colleagues when I heard it. That particular shift in a crowd when a performance is beginning. I turned around and saw Vivian holding court near the elevator bank. A small group gathered around her, everyone angled toward her the way people angle toward a stage. She was talking about the car. Someone had asked about it. Or she had steered the conversation there. It was hard to tell with Vivian. She had a talent for making everything feel organic when it wasn't. And she was describing the process of investing in herself, how she had researched the market, negotiated the deal. Decided that if she was going to show up to client meetings, she was going to show up correctly. First impressions are a financial decision, she said, and a few people nodded like she had said something wise. Then someone in the group spotted me, smiled, and asked the question I should have anticipated. "Is that your sister? What does she drive?" Vivian turned. She found my face across the rooftop, and she smiled. Not the warm kind, but the kind that means something is about to happen that she has already decided you will absorb quietly. She pointed. "See that one?" she said, gesturing toward the street below where my old Honda sat under a street light. "That's hers. She's had it since, 2011? She laughed. Light, casual, like it was a charming little detail about me rather than a public dissection. "I keep telling her, Jade, you work in finance. You of all people should know when something is a bad investment." The group laughed. Not cruelly, exactly, but enough. I stood very still. My drink was cold in my hand. I could feel my mother shifting slightly beside me, the way she always shifted when she wanted to smooth something over without actually addressing it. Vivian was still going. "She's just very attached to it." Another small laugh. "Some people are sentimental. I'm more of a forward-looking person myself." I looked at her, leaning against the elevator bank, relaxed, luminous, performing effortless success for an audience who had no idea that the car parked downstairs, the one she was gesturing toward as a punchline, had its insurance premium paid by the same person she was currently using as a prop. I didn't say a word. I took a slow sip of my drink, smiled at the group the way you smile when you have just made a decision you are completely at peace with, and excused myself to find the bathroom. I didn't go to the bathroom. I stood in the stairwell for 3 minutes, very quietly, and let the thing that had been sitting wrong in my chest for weeks finally settle into something clear. By the time I walked back out onto that rooftop, I already knew exactly what I was going to do when I got home. I drove home in silence. Not the tense kind. Not the kind where you're replaying every moment and building your case. Just silence. The clean, flat kind that comes after something has been decided. My Honda is a 2011 Civic with 214,000 kilometers on it, a small crack in the rear bumper from a parking lot incident 3 years ago, and a check engine light that has been on for so long I have started to think of it as ambiance. It is not a beautiful car, but it has never once let me down. It has never cost me more than I expected, and every single payment I made on it came from my own account under my own name for my own use. I noticed somewhere around the third traffic light that I was not angry. I had expected to be angry. Instead, I felt something closer to clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you have been avoiding a number on a spreadsheet for months and you finally open the file and look at it directly. I got home at 10:47. I know because I checked my phone when I locked the front door. I have it from years of tracking time the way people in my field track everything, precisely, without sentiment. I made tea. I sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. The first thing I pulled up was my banking portal. I went to the recurring payment section and scrolled until I found it. BMW Financial Services, 5th of every month. The exact amount that had been leaving my account like a quiet little tax on my own generosity for 26 months. I had set it up myself. I had made it automatic because I knew Vivian wouldn't, and I had told myself at the time that this was just being practical. I looked at the total, 26 payments. I added them up. Then I added the insurance premiums on top of that. I sat with that number for a moment. Then I opened a new spreadsheet. I am not a dramatic person by nature. I do not make decisions in the heat of emotion if I can help it. What I do, what I have always done, is build a file. I documented every payment I had made on her behalf. Date, amount, running total. I cross-referenced it against the transfer she had actually sent me, which in the last 8 months had become increasingly irregular, and in the last 2 months had stopped entirely. I noted the dates of every text I had sent asking about it. I included the voice note responses. I included the 4-day read receipt. By the time I finished the spreadsheet, it was past midnight. The tea had gone cold. The number at the bottom of the column was not a surprise. I had known roughly what it would be, but seeing it laid out with that kind of precision had a weight to it that estimates never quite carry. I saved the file. I named it simply and without drama, Vivian Vehicle Summary. Then I opened the insurance portal. I want to be clear about something because I know how this part of the story sounds. I did not cancel anything that night. I am not impulsive. What I did that night was I read the policy terms carefully. I checked what I was legally entitled to do as the primary policyholder. I checked the loan agreement, the cosigner terms, the process for requesting a cosigner release or a loan transfer. I read everything I had signed 2 years ago with the careful attention I should have applied before I signed it. What I found was exactly what I had suspected. On paper, this was entirely my vehicle, my name on the title, my credit on the line, my liability if anything went wrong. Vivian was, in the language of the documents, an authorized driver, nothing more. I had handed her a car and called it sisterhood. The paperwork called it something else entirely. I drafted an email. I did not send it that night. I wrote it, read it back, revised it twice, and saved it as a draft. It was professional in tone, the way I would write to a counterparty in a business dispute. It outlined the outstanding balance she owed me, the payment schedule she had agreed to and abandoned, and a clear deadline, 30 days to either bring the account current and set up her own auto-pay directly to the lender, or begin the process of refinancing the loan into her name alone. I attached a spreadsheet. I read the email one more time. It was fair. It was specific. It gave her a real opportunity to fix things before the consequences arrived. Then I went to bed. I slept better than I had in months, not because I had done anything yet, but because I had stopped pretending the spreadsheet didn't exist. I sent the email the next morning at 8:53 after I had reread it one final time with fresh eyes and a second cup of coffee. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had a risk assessment meeting at 10 and I wanted the email sent and documented before I walked into that room and spent 3 hours thinking about other people's exposure. Vivian read it at 9:17. I could see the read receipt. She did not respond. By noon, she had not responded. By the end of the workday, nothing. I did not follow up. The email was clear. The deadline was 30 days. I had done my part. She responded on day 3, not with a reply to the email. She texted me, casual, almost breezy, as though I had sent her a minor administrative note rather than a documented financial ultimatum. Jade Lowell, it's not that deep. You know I'm going through a transition period. I'll sort it out. I read the message. I did not reply. I took a screenshot, added it to a folder I had created on my desktop labeled with the same name as the spreadsheet, and went back to work. On day 7, she sent another text. Can you just call me? This feels so formal. We're sisters. I thought about that word for a moment. Sisters. She had deployed it the way people deploy certain words when they want to move a conversation out of the territory where accountability lives and back into the territory where love is supposed to override everything else. I had spent most of my life responding to that word the way she intended. Softening, adjusting, finding a way to make the discomfort disappear. I typed back 3 words. Email works fine. She did not email. On day 11, my mother called. I knew from the first 2 seconds of the call that Vivian had gotten there first. My mother had a specific tone she used when she had been briefed by my sister. A careful, measured warmth that was really just a cushion she placed under difficult things before delivering them. Vivian says you sent her some kind of letter, my mother said. An email, I said, with documentation. A pause. She's upset, Jade. I know. She says you're treating her like a stranger, like some kind of debtor. I let that sit for a moment before I answered. Mom, she is a debtor. She owes me money. That's not an emotional position, it's just what the numbers say. My mother made a sound I had heard my entire life. Something between a sigh and a prayer, the sound she made when she wanted the world to be simpler than it was. She's your sister. She's going through a hard time. She went through a hard time at a rooftop party 2 nights ago and laughed at my car in front of 40 people while I was standing there, I said. My voice was even. I was not performing calm. I actually felt it. And the car she was leaning on when she did that is registered in my name and paid for with my money. So I need you to help me understand what I'm supposed to feel grateful for. Silence. I'm not asking her to move out, I continued. I'm not taking anything from her that was ever actually hers. I'm asking her to take over the payments on a loan she agreed to take responsibility for. That's all. My mother said she would talk to Vivian. She said it the way she always said things like that, with genuine intention and very little follow-through. I told her I loved her and ended the call. Vivian's next move came on day 16. She showed up at my apartment. I opened the door, and she was standing there in a camel coat I recognized from her Instagram. Hair done, expression arranged into something that was designed to look vulnerable, but had clearly been prepared in advance. She had brought coffee, 2 cups from the good place near her office. It was a very Vivian gesture, the kind of thing that acknowledged the situation enough to seem sincere without actually conceding anything. I let her in because she was my sister and because I was curious. She sat down on my couch, wrapped both hands around her cup, and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as rehearsed softness. I feel like you're punishing me, she said, for a joke, for one comment at a party. I sat across from her. I did not have coffee because I had already had 2 cups and I did not want the problem. I'm not punishing you for the comment, I said. The comment just clarified something I had been slow to see. Which is what? That you've been comfortable, I said. Very comfortable. For a long time. With a version of your life that I was quietly subsidizing. And I let that happen because I told myself it was helping. But helping and being used can look identical from the inside, and I finally looked at the numbers. She opened her mouth, closed it. The email stands, I said. 30 days. You either refinance into your own name or bring the account current and take over payments. I'll help you find a lender if you need a referral, but my autopay stops at the end of this month regardless. Her expression shifted. The rehearsed softness gave way to something sharper. You would actually let them repossess my car. I looked at her steadily. It's not your car, Vivian. That's the whole point. She left 20 minutes later. She did not take my coffee cup back. She did not say goodbye. Exactly. She said fine, which in her language meant the conversation was over and the next phase was beginning. I cleaned up, opened my laptop, and confirmed that my auto pay cancellation request was still processing. It was. My mother called a family dinner on day 22. She framed it as a Sunday meal, the way she always did when she wanted to create the appearance of normalcy around something that wasn't normal at all. She made the food Vivian liked. She set the table properly. She was, in her own way, trying to build a container strong enough to hold what she knew was coming. I brought a folder, not to be theatrical. I brought it because I had learned a long time ago that in rooms where emotion is the primary currency, documentation is the only thing that doesn't depreciate. I had printed the spreadsheet, the original loan agreement, the insurance policy with my name on it, and a clean 1-page summary of every transfer Vivian had made versus every payment that had actually left my account. I put it in a plain manila folder and set it on the passenger seat of my Honda for the 20-minute drive to my mother's house. Vivian arrived late. She always arrived late to things where she expected to be the subject of discussion. It was a power position she had refined over years without ever seeming to realize she was doing it. She came in with her coat still on, kissed my mother on the cheek, sat down at the table, and looked at me the way you look at someone you have already decided is being unreasonable. We ate for 15 minutes in the specific silence of a family that is performing dinner. Then my mother set down her fork and said, I want you two to talk this through. Vivian looked at me. There's nothing to talk through. I told her I'd handle it. She's choosing to make this into something bigger than it is. She sent me a legal document, she added, for my mother's benefit, like I'm a client. I opened the folder. I did not raise my voice. I placed the 1-page summary in the center of the table, flat, the way you place evidence rather than ammunition. This isn't a legal document, I said. It's a spreadsheet. These are the payments I made on your behalf over 26 months. This column is what you transferred back to me. This column is the difference. I tapped the bottom of the page. That number is what you currently owe me, not counting the 2 months you missed before the party. Vivian glanced at it, looked away. I said I would pay you back. You said that 11 months ago. I've been going through a transition. You went to Bali in March, I said. Not accusatory, just a fact. I saw it on your stories. The trip looked beautiful. I'm glad you enjoyed it. The table went quiet. My mother looked at the paper. I watched her eyes move across the columns, doing the arithmetic slowly, and I watched the moment the number at the bottom landed. She looked up at me, then at Vivian. Vivian's jaw tightened. So this is what this is. You've been cataloging my life, building a case against me. I've been documenting my own finances, I said, which is what you do when your name is on a loan. You offered, she said. The sharpness in her voice had arrived fully now, the rehearsed softness entirely gone. Nobody forced you. You offered to help me, and now you're using it against me like some kind of... I offered, I said, because you sat in my kitchen and cried and told me you couldn't show up to your new job in a car that made people question whether you belong there. I let that sit for exactly 1 second. And then 2 years later, you stood on a rooftop and used my card to make people question whether I belonged there. So yes, I offered, and then I watched what you did with the thing I offered, and I made a different decision. Vivian stood up. This is insane. You're going to let them take my car over a spreadsheet. I looked up at her. Say it again, I said quietly. She blinked. You keep saying my car, I said. Say it one more time and really listen to the word. Because the title has my name on it. The insurance has my name on it. The lender has my name on it. If that car disappears from your building's parking lot next week, the person whose credit takes the hit is me. The person who has been absorbing that risk for 26 months while you posted Bali content and missed transfers is me. I closed the folder. I'm not taking your car, Vivian. I never had a car to take. I'm just stopping the part where I pretend it was yours. The room was very still. My mother had both hands flat on the table. She was not going to intervene. I think somewhere in the arithmetic she had just done in her head, something had shifted. Vivian picked up her coat from the back of the chair. Her hands were not entirely steady. Fine, she said. Same word as before. Same tone. But something underneath it was different now. The weight of it was different. She walked to the door. Stopped with her hand on the frame. I hope this is worth it to you, she said. I thought about the rooftop. The street light on my Honda, the laughing emoji on day 7, the Bali stories, the number at the bottom of the spreadsheet. It's not about worth, I said. It's about accuracy. I finally got the numbers right. She left. The door closed behind her. My mother picked up her fork, set it back down, and said nothing for a long time. I drove home in my 2011 Civic with 214,000 kilometers on it. And I did not feel victorious. I felt the way you feel after a long overdue audit, tired, clear, and finished. The auto pay stopped on the 1st of the following month, exactly as I had said it would. Vivian did not refinance. She did not find a cosigner. She did not call the lender as far as I could tell until they called her, which happened on day 12 after the missed payment. When a number she didn't recognize showed up on her phone and she finally had to have the conversation I had been trying to give her 30 days to prepare for. She called me that night, not to apologize, to ask if I would reinstate the payment just for 1 more month while she sorted things out. I told her no, kindly but no. She called again 3 days later. Same ask, different framing. She said she was embarrassed. She said her colleagues had seen the lender's number on her phone. She said she didn't know how to explain it if the car disappeared from the parking garage. I said you could tell them you're refinancing. That's actually true. She hung up. The car was repossessed on a Thursday morning, 6 weeks after I'd canceled the auto pay. I did not witness it. I found out because my mother called me, voice low, like she was reporting something solemn. She said a truck had come to Vivian's building. She said Vivian had been at work when it happened, which I was privately grateful for. There is a version of consequences that is instructive and a version that is just humiliating, and I had never wanted the second one for her. What I'd always wanted, if I was honest, was for her to take the 30 days seriously, to call the lender, to do the paperwork, to become, in the most literal and administrative sense, the self-made woman she had been performing at parties for 2 years. She didn't, and that is not something I can carry anymore. In the months that followed, Vivian and I did not speak much. My mother moved carefully between us the way she always had, keeping the peace by keeping the distance, never quite addressing the thing directly. Vivian got a used car eventually. Something sensible, financed under her own name with a co-signer who was not me. I know because my mother told me with a particular tone that suggested she thought I should feel something about it. I felt something. It was relief. Not because I wanted Vivian to struggle, but because a car in your own name, paid for, with your own money, is a completely different object than a car someone else is quietly funding while you use it to perform a version of yourself that isn't real yet. One of those things builds a life. The other one just delays the building. I used the money I had been paying toward her loan and her insurance to accelerate the payments on my own mortgage. By the end of that year, I was 14 months ahead of schedule. I also finally bought myself a new car. Nothing extravagant. A 3-year-old Mazda with low mileage, a clean service history, and not a single other person's name anywhere on the paperwork. I sat in the dealership and signed the documents and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Like the transaction was just between me and the thing I was actually buying. I think about the rooftop sometimes. Not with anger. The anger was never really the point. I think about the version of me that drove to that party, carried a grocery store bottle of wine, because she had been raised to never show up empty-handed, stood at the edge of a crowd and absorbed a joke, made at her expense, and then got in her old car and drove home and built a spreadsheet instead of a scene. I think she was right to do it that way, not because the quiet approach is always noble, but because the spreadsheet was the truth, and the truth was the only thing that was ever going to actually change anything. You know what nobody tells you about being the reliable one in a family? They tell you it's a virtue. They tell you it's love. What they don't tell you is that reliability, without boundaries, is just a service that people learn to expect and stop seeing. You become infrastructure, essential and invisible. And the moment you announce that the service is changing, everyone reacts as though you have done something to them, when really you have just stopped doing something for them. That distinction took me 34 years to understand clearly. I understand it now. If there was anything I want you to take from this, and I mean you specifically, not some abstract audience, because I think if you are still watching at this point, you have probably felt some version of this in your own life. It is this. The moment I stopped funding a version of my sister's life that she had not actually built yet, she had to start building it. That is not cruelty. That is just what happens when you remove a subsidy. The real thing has to show up. And the moment I stopped explaining my decision to people who had already decided I was wrong, I got something back that I hadn't realized I'd been spending. The energy I used to use managing everyone else's comfort with my choices, I now spend it on my mortgage, on my Mazda, on my own life, which is quieter than it used to be and significantly more accurate. The last thing Vivian said to me at that family dinner was that she hoped it was worth it. I've thought about that question a lot. Here is my answer. It was never about worth. Worth is what you calculate when you're deciding whether to make an investment. I wasn't investing anymore. I was just finally reading the statement correctly and closing the account that had never been in my name in any way that mattered. So let me ask you something before you go. If the person who laughed at everything you quietly built turned out to be living inside a life you were privately funding, would you have kept paying to protect their image? Or would you have let the numbers tell the truth? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.